Welcome back. I'm Danny, and this is Silent Motive, where we explore the strange, the unsettling, and the chilling mysteries that just don't quit. On today's episode, we are going to finish talking about the dating game killer, aka Rodney Alcala. But before we get too deep into it, don't forget to give us a like, a follow, a share, a subscribe, or hell, even a rating wherever you are getting your weekly dose of Silent Motive. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. Now, go ahead and make yourself a delicious drink and settle in because this one is a wild ride and you do not want to get caught with your pants down. Before we get started, again, just a general trigger warning. Rodney Alcala is a piece of shit, so this is your content warning. There's talk of sexual abuse, physical abuse, strangulation, all of that kind of stuff. So this is all of the warnings that I can warn you to be warned. Proceed with caution and make sure that you listen to part 1 before you listen to part 2 because we're not going to go over everything, so you don't want to miss any part of it. So in the first episode, we talked about Rodney's life and how he became the contributing member of society that he was. Joking. I'm joking. We spoke about his first confirmed victim, Tally Shapiro, and her horrific scene and how he went to prison for about the time it takes to blink and was released. We talked about his next victim in the timeline, which was Connie Crilly, but he was actually acting under the name John Berger when he committed that crime. He had another 13-year-old victim that was able to escape him, and this happened while being supervised as a sex offender under the California Department of Corrections. He went back to prison and was released 2 years later and would commit the murder of Ellen Hover again under the guise of John Berger. Like I mentioned, if you didn't catch the first episode, I definitely recommend giving it a listen before you listen to this one. Otherwise, you're just going to be missing a lot of the fucking details. So, Rodney's next victim was Jill Ann Barcombe. She was born in Oneida, I'm not really sure, in New York, which is located about 30 miles east of Syracuse, New York. She grew up in a tight-knit family and a neighborhood where everyone looked out for each other and knew everyone's routines. Jill's father worked in a factory and her mother managed the home and took care of the kids. They were your average middle-class family. Jill was the youngest and was referred to as the free spirit of the group. She was outgoing, curious, and always wanting to explore the world. From a young age, Jill showed a strong independence. She had an energy that stood out, being kind-hearted, but always on the move, and would often talk about life outside of upstate New York. In her teen years, she developed an interest in fashion and, photography. She loved Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles and would spend hours reading fashion magazines and fantasize of a warmer place to call home where the sun always shines. Her friends would say she wasn't someone who was afraid of being herself. She was rebellious, but not reckless. Jill was hopeful. She wanted to travel the world. Hey, same. I love traveling. She wanted to go to California and live the kind of life that seemed impossible in a small industrial town like Oneida. Her parents, of course, didn't love the idea of their youngest daughter moving across the country, but they supported her the best that they knew how. In 1977, at the young age of 18 years old, Jill made the move to Los Angeles. For her, California represented everything that Oneida didn't. Freedom, creativity, possibilities, all that. Initially, she stayed with friends and took simple jobs like waitressing and clerical work. Pretty much anything she could do to just get by. Now, Jill was young, yes, but she wasn't oblivious to the dangers of being a young woman alone in a big city, but she did also have a trusting heart and optimism that would draw people to her. Jill would call her parents back home and write them letters checking in, and she would always speak about her excitement and would describe how amazing the beaches and the people were. Her mother said, quote, "She said she loved the sunshine. It made her feel alive," end quote. By November 1977, Jill had been in LA for a handful of months. She was adjusting to the life in a new city and growing as her own person. In her last call home, she told her parents that she missed them, but she felt like she was finally where she was meant to be. A few days later, Jill would cross paths with Rodney, who again was posing as a photographer, cruising the streets of Los Angeles in search of women to lure into his web. On November 9th, 1977, Jill had gone out with some friends in the Hollywood Hills. She was seen leaving the gathering, and there's different accounts of if she was walking or if she hitchhiked, which wasn't uncommon during this time. But unfortunately, Rodney knew this. He knew that girls would hitchhike and would drive around looking for potential victims. It's rumored that he offered Jill a ride on Mulholland Drive or somewhere near there under the guise, again, of being a photographer. Jill's body was discovered on November 10th, 1977, by someone driving along Mulholland that originally mistook her body for a mannequin. When he got closer, he realized it was a body. It was clear that Jill had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled with her own pant leg. The way that her body was laying, it was clear that she had been positioned in a deliberate way, likely after she was killed. Detectives determined that she had been bludgeoned with a rock and strangled. This whole scene was a hallmark of Rodney's psychosexual control. At the time, LAPD investigators were completely shocked by how brutal the scene was. The attacks suggested a sadistic killer, and unfortunately, they had no leads or potential suspects. Shock. With no witnesses, the case would go cold. For decades, her murder would remain unsolved until, you guessed it, DNA testing in the early 2000s. That was when her family would learn the truth that she was one of Rodney's earliest murder victims after his release. Again, he's been in prison twice at this point. When investigators began to re-examine her case, they were able to compare the biological evidence from Jill's crime scene to entries into the national database, and they got a hit for Rodney. I don't want to jump around too much since this case is already all over the place, but there would be a trial for Jill's murder in 2010, but I will touch on it in a little bit. So, Rodney would take his next victim the next month in December of 1977, and that would be Georgia Marie Wickstead. Georgia was born in 1950 and was raised in Malibu, California, in a loving family. She was the kind of person that people remembered her for her gentleness, intelligent, and being compassionate. She excelled in school and had a natural gift for science, which would eventually help her create a career in nursing. By her early 20s, she would obtain a nursing degree and went to work at a hospital in Malibu. Her colleagues described her as the nurse who would stay late to comfort patients, who would remember birthdays, and treated everyone with respect. Georgia loved books, classical music, and the ocean, and she had goals to become a pediatric nurse practitioner. Now, Georgia wasn't a partier, but she was social while also being careful. She didn't drink much, and she didn't go out with strangers. She had a structured life with routine and a quiet independence. Georgia would drink her morning coffee, go for jogs along the beach, and finish her day off reading a good book. On December 16th, Georgia spoke to a friend on the phone, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Sometime that night, Rodney crossed her path. Of course, he was acting like a photographer, approaching women for his portfolio. It's believed that he followed her home from work and somehow convinced her to let him into her apartment. On December 18th, when Georgia didn't show up for work, her co-workers called police requesting a check be done, like a welfare check. When they arrived, they discovered her body lying on her bed, partially clothed. Georgia had been beaten, raped, and strangled. The apartment appeared to have been ransacked, but it didn't appear as though anything had actually been taken. Again, her body was deliberately posed with her knees slightly bent and her head turned towards the light. This case would be investigated by the Los Angeles County Sheriff as a homicide by strangulation, but again, there were no leads. No fingerprints matched in the database that they had access to, and of course, no DNA technology. We know that's decades away, so this case went cold too. Initially, there was no connection made between Georgia's case and Jill's case. This is probably because they were in different jurisdictions and had different agencies investigating. This case would stay cold until, again, early 2000s, when LAPD Cold Case Unit was able to again compare biological evidence taken to the DNA database and got a hit for Rodney. This would be part of the 2010 trial. So after Georgia's murder, Rodney struck again. His next victim would be Charlotte Jean Lamb in June of 1978. Charlotte was born in 1946 and grew up in Santa Monica, California. She was raised with traditional values of hard work, kindness, and self-reliance. She was known for being a gentle person who was thoughtful, compassionate, and carried herself with a calm confidence that made people trust her. Charlotte was described as a peacemaker and someone who always looked for the good in others. By her early 30s, she would become a legal secretary working in Santa Monica for a small law firm. She was efficient, smart, and dedicated. Her co-workers said she was the one who made everything run smoothly. Charlotte was a single mother of two, and that was something that she took pride in. Her kids were her world. She was a gentle, grounded, and private person who didn't take unnecessary risks. When Charlotte did socialize, it was typically with close friends or neighbors that, of course, she trusted. She didn't go out late or engage with strangers, but she was still friendly and polite to everyone that she met. It was a warm Saturday evening, and Charlotte had stayed home that night and was doing laundry in her apartment complex. Her kids were staying with some relatives that night. At some point during the night, Charlotte came in contact with old photographer Rodney. No one is quite sure how they met, as of course there's no witnesses and no forced entry into her apartment. Regardless, she disappeared. The following morning, June 25th, 1978, Charlotte's nude body was found in the laundry room of another apartment complex in El Segundo, which is several miles away from where she lived. The scene was a typical Rodney scene. It was horrific and deliberate. Charlotte had been raped and strangled with a shoelace. Her body had been posed with one arm over her head, and her legs were displayed like his other victims. Again, the killer had placed her in a way that suggested control, power, and pride, like he wanted the discovery itself to be part of the performance. Forensic investigators found fibers, semen, and a partial palm print and collected all of them. Thank God. Finally, with Charlotte's murder, police were noticing a pattern: sexual assault, strangulation, and body posing. Detectives from LA, Santa Monica, and El Segundo started to compare notes. Charlotte's case would go cold, like the others, until 2003. So not even 6 months after Charlotte's murder, Rodney would make his first TV appearance on, the dating game as Bachelor number 1. The format of the show was pretty simple. 1 woman, 3 hidden bachelors, a wall between them, and a series of cheeky questions designed to get the audience laughing and get some flirtation. Behind the wall sat Rodney, who was a 35-year-old Los Angeles photographer. Of course, what no one knew at the time was that he was a rapist, serial killer, and child predator. And the reality was, he was searching for his next victim in front of America. The way that Rodney was able to audition for the show was through a casting call that took place in Hollywood. Of course, as we already know, he presented himself as charismatic, smart, and worldly. He said his hobbies were motorcycling, skydiving, and barf, dating beautiful women. Barf. Worst pickup line I think I've ever heard in my life. The background checks that they did in 1978 were not exactly extensive. The California Sex Offender Registry wasn't computerized, and his prior convictions never showed up on the background check. On the day of recording, September 13th, 1978, Rodney waited backstage, waiting to be introduced. The Bachelorette was Cheryl Bradshaw, who was a 29-year-old actress from California who was really just looking for a little bit of TV exposure mixed with maybe a little bit of romance. She didn't see Rodney until after the show was done filming and had only been able to communicate through the wall. She asked him very get-to-know-you type of questions that were clearly scripted for ratings. For example, she said, quote, "I'm serving you for dinner. What are you called and what do you look like?" End quote. Rodney's response makes my whole body want to throw up, but he says, quote,
"I'm called the banana and I look really good, so peel me."
End quote. Of course, the crowd went crazy and the other contestants just rolled their eyes. I also rolled my eyes into the back of my skull and then dug my eyeballs out of my head. Anyway, after several rounds, Cheryl picked Bachelor number 1, and the host says their date will be tennis lessons followed by a romantic dinner. So afterwards, Cheryl was approached by Rodney, and she instantly felt a sense of dread. During this brief interaction, he mentioned that he liked taking girls to dark rooms. Now, poor innocent Cheryl excused herself and instantly found a staff member and informed them how she felt uncomfortable and requested to not go on the date. Luckily, the date was canceled, and again, luckily, Rodney didn't seem to care and just left the studio. Little did Cheryl know, this probably saved her life. So, after being on the show, Rodney just had to get back to his routine. His next victim would be Jill Marie Parento. Jill was born in 1958 and grew up in Burbank, California. She was the eldest daughter in a close Italian-American family. She was responsible, polite, and protective of her younger siblings. Jill had a nurturing quality about her that was obvious from a young age. After high school, she would go to Glendale Community College and worked part-time. She got a full-time job later at a local insurance company and was always very reliable and happy. Jill had dreams of eventually transferring to a university and studying business admin. She lived alone in her apartment and had recently broken up with a boyfriend. Jill was optimistic but told her family that she was going to take some time to focus on herself, which, good for Jill. On the evening of June 13th, 1979, Jill had plans to go to a John Denver concert with some friends. She ended up reaching out to one of those friends and told her she actually wasn't feeling up for the concert and just wanted to stay home instead. Now, again, it's not entirely clear how she stumbled upon Rodney, but it's rumored she may have known him from before this night. Investigators would later say it's possible that he may have photographed her before, possibly at a party or some type of social event in Burbank. Neighbors would actually report seeing an unfamiliar man, tall, dark hair, carrying a camera bag, near Jill's apartment around the time of her murder. When Jill didn't show up for work the next morning, her co-workers, of course, got worried. Friends stopped by later that afternoon and found her door unlocked. Police were called, and Jill's body was found in her bedroom, partially nude, with signs of sexual assault and strangulation. This incident, there were signs of forced entry, though. A pried open window. Jill's body was posed like previous victims in a very deliberate way. Of course, there were no leads at this time, and the case remained cold until, early 2000s. I do have to say, I am thankful and glad that these investigators were taking swabs diligently and preserving evidence, even if they couldn't test it at the time. The last confirmed victim would be the one that finally gets Rodney caught. I say confirmed because it's actually alleged that he has over 100 murder victims. But Robin Samso, he takes it back to the young ones. A 12-year-old little girl from Huntington Beach, California. She was born in 1966 in Los Angeles County and primarily lived with her mom. Robin was bright, carefree, and full of life and energy. She was 12. She loved being outside, she loved practicing ballet, and of course, going to the beach, a true California girl. Robin would spend the afternoons riding her yellow bicycle around the neighborhood and hanging out with her friends. She wanted to become a professional dancer when she grew up. She was always practicing her ballet in front of her mirror in her room, spinning and smiling, singing music. Robin loved her friends and was always the one who would stand up for someone. On June 20th, 1979, Robin went to ballet class. It was the first week of summer vacation. After class, she met up with her friend, Bridget Wilvert, and the two decided to ride their bikes down Pacific Coast Highway. As the two hung out, a man with long brown hair and a camera approached them. He told them he was a professional photographer and asked if he could take their picture for a contest. Bridget would describe him later as handsome but strange. Something about him made her uneasy. A neighbor actually witnessed this exchange and told him to leave the girls alone. But Robin wouldn't make it home that day. That evening, Robin's mother realized something wasn't right. She called friends, and then she called the police. Huntington Beach officers launched a missing persons investigation that same night. Robin's yellow bike was found near Pacific Coast Highway, kickstand down as if she simply stopped mid-ride, but there was no Robin. Her mother stayed up all night, obviously worried sick, calling friends, hospital, the police, basically anyone that could have seen or heard from Robin. Her mother said later, quote, "I knew the second I saw that bike that something terrible had happened," end quote. Which that has got to make you sick as a mother. I can't even imagine. It wasn't until 12 days later, on July 2nd, 1979, a park ranger found skeletal remains in the foothills of the Sierra Madre Mountains, which is about 40 miles from Huntington Beach. Dental records would be used to confirm that those remains belonged to Robin. The remains were consistent with a sexual assault and strangulation. So police interviewed Robin's friends and quickly learned about the man with the camera. Bridget's description was enough to draw the attention of detectives who remembered Rodney, who, of course, as we remember, was a recently paroled sex offender, and he matched the description. On July 24th, 1979, he was arrested. Rodney was questioned and initially, of course, denied everything. Police located a receipt in his possession for a storage locker that he had in Seattle. Detectives would search it, and they found hundreds of photographs of women and young girls, some alive. Many were never identified, along with a pair of gold hoop earrings. Robin's mother recognized these earrings and said they were a gift, and Robin had been wearing them the day that she went missing. Rodney would be booked into jail and was held without bail. Thank the Lord, it's about time. Even during his interview, he tried to remain calm and use his charm in his favor. Rodney attempted to claim he had alibis for all of the incidents, so this is one of them. He said that when Robin disappeared, he was at an amusement park, which of course was a lie. The photographic evidence and quote-unquote trophy items that were discovered during the interview/search phase were used as corroborating evidence against Rodney. After his arrest, the case against Rodney expanded rapidly. With his arrest and all the evidence they located, they were able to link him to all of the other cases. The first trial was for Robin's murder, and it resulted in a conviction in 1980, which is pretty fast turnaround. Rodney received a death sentence. That verdict would be overturned in 1984 because jurors had been improperly informed about the sexual crimes he had committed. In May of 1986, a second trial that was essentially identical to the first trial except for the omission of the prior criminal record testimony was done, and he was again convicted and again sentenced to death, which as he should. Unfortunately, this would also be overturned in 2001 in a federal appeal citing ineffective counsel and faulty jury instructions. This meant he would be tried for a third time. During the appeals process, California law enforcement began to digitize evidence and would begin testing cold cases with, yay, modern DNA testing, thank the Lord. With Rodney being a convicted violent felon, his DNA was entered into CODIS, which I've spoken about before, but it's essentially a nationwide database that houses DNA profiles. When his profile was ran, in addition to the cold case running the swabs from these crime scenes, Rodney's DNA matched DNA that was found on 4 unsolved murders in the Los Angeles area in the 1970s. So, that was Jill Barcombs, Georgia Wickstead, Charlotte Lamb, and Jill Parento, with the DNA matching as well as the similarities in the signatures, being the sexual assaults, strangulation, and the body posing, were all consistent with Rodney's established patterns. Prosecutors in Orange County and Los Angeles County worked together to merge 5 murders into one comprehensive case, arguing the common MO or modus operandi, which made the consolidation appropriate. The California Attorney General's office approved the plan, and in 2006, Orange County District Attorney refiled charges against Rodney for all 5 murders.
Praise Jesus.
This provided this new jury with the ability to see the entire pattern instead of treating each killing as an isolated act. This would be the trial that Tally his first documented victim, would get an opportunity to share her experience and testify against Rodney. Now, Rodney's lawyers, of course, filed motion after motion to suppress evidence, argued contamination, lack of chain of custody, and prejudice. The judge ruled that all 5 murders would be heard together before a single jury. The case went to trial in January 2010. By the time trial went live, Rodney pulled a Ted Bundy and decided to represent himself at 66 years old. The trial lasted 5 weeks, where prosecutors would present the DNA results, forensic evidence, jewelry, photographs, and survivor testimonies. The trial of the combined cases created a timeline showing the escalation of Rodney's violence. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days before they found him guilty on all 5 counts of first-degree murder, and, shocker here, he was sentenced to death for a 3rd time. Rodney ended up getting extradited to New York and pled guilty to the 2 murders that he committed out there and received 2 additional life sentences. Unfortunately, Rodney died of natural causes in 2021 before he could be executed at the age of 77 years old. So, that is the terrible, awful, no good story of the piece of dog trash that was Rodney Alcala and some of his victims. I'm pretty sure I got the big ones in there, but like I said, there is a possibility that God and Rodney are the only 2 who probably know how many victims he actually had. But I feel like with his patterns that he had, if he had many, many more victims, they would be found the way that the other victims were posed and strangled and probably raped, because he was just an absolute terrible person. But anyway, thank you for sticking around for another episode of Silent Motive. Remember, every silence has a motive. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and follow us to enjoy a new episode every Monday, where we dive into another modern mystery that blurs the lines between creepy and criminal. And like I've mentioned before, if you have any cases or spooky stories you'd like me to do an episode on, head over to our Instagram and shoot me a direct message or an instant message, whatever they're called. And if there's something that you want me to talk about, awesome. Drop that over there. And then also let me know if I can give you a shout out for bringing that episode to me. I will do my best to get around to all of them at some point, but I'm a one-woman show here. So, and just so you know, the Instagram handle is silent_motive_pod. Like I said, feel free to shoot me a message, give us a follow on there, and share with your friends, share with your family, your coworkers, your mom, your mom's mom, your boyfriend's mom, or whoever likes true crime in your life. Thanks.
Thank you.